Hello and welcome to Shaderest, an upcoming cooperative resource management game from Auburn Games. Hosted here on TTS, please join me for our first solo playthrough with Wrath. Now, if you're new to Shaderest, what you're looking at right now is one player area. That includes the large player spellboard at the bottom, the two attached cards on the left and right, the action tokens right above us right now, and the general player resources, cairn seals, health, and spirit to the left, arrayed in little circles. Each druid has a spell board. We're playing as Wrath, and so this is our spell board, replete with 4 spells we'll cast over the course of the game. Our Season of Life card, which will give us additional benefits depending on the game state, that we'll try to keep our eye on as we play the game. And to the left, our Discipline card. Our Discipline and our Season of Life cards were made in out-of-game decisions, but we're also just following our recommended setup. Right now, we're double-checking our setup instructions. According to our rules, or our teachings on this Discipline card, we get additional cairn seals, which is a resource we'll discuss in the future, an ability to heal ourselves partway through the game, and additional health and spirit. Normally, as we'd play on Folktale difficulty, we would have only 5 health and 3 spirit, but you can count them here. We have 6 health and 4 spirit. We need health to survive the cairn and spirit to cast our most potent spells. Finally, we had our 3 little action tokens, and they're just primed and ready for our first turn. To the side, we have the Wandering Druids. Every circle of druids is comprised of exactly 4. And we're only one of them, so we're joined by 3 wanderers. They'll only participate in this cairn, this game session, and they'll wander off at the end. To the left was Dusk, in the center is Wisdom, and to the right is Fervor. The Wandering Druids are here to help us clear the cairn. Without further ado, here is the cairn deck of shades on the left, the cairn card in the center, and to the right, a deck of timelines. The final step of setup is drawing one at random from this deck, and we've drawn Before the Moon Swallows the Sun. We'll set aside all of the other unused timelines. They won't be a part of this game session. To win a game of Shaderest, you need to lay to rest all of the shades in the shade deck to the left of the cairn card. Now, the cairn card itself is going to give us 3 pieces of information: the name of the cairn, how to organize the cairn, and the special rule at the bottom. We'll keep the special rule in mind. We'll bring it up later. And the organization has already been done for us, so we can go straight to our timeline card. The timeline card tells us that a certain kind of shade called a restless has the power to rise again, even if it would normally be removed from the game. Well, this card doesn't change the quantity of cards in the shade deck. It does change the quality of those cards. So every time you play a cairn and you receive a different timeline from the deck of timelines, it might radically alter your expectations. Now here we need to grab 1 die for that card and our 4 die for Wrath. Now the end of setup is always the start of the game, and the start of the game is a shade phase. Phases in Shaderest are divided into shade phases and druid phases, and they do exactly what they sound like. So shades are going to act first. We'll draw always 4 shades. And then sometimes a shade might have a rule that would otherwise allow it to interact. But for the most part, the shades get drawn and placed at their starting location, the cairn itself. Each shade card tells us exactly what we need to know in order to lay that shade to rest. The top number is the amount of balance we need to restore to it before that shade will be at peace. In the center is an animal symbol that tells us how that shade interacts, and at the bottom is the kind of damage that shade might deal to us if it's in close proximity. Finally, every shade has a special rule on the bottom right that matches their name. So all of the Restless have the same rule, all of the Whalers might have the same rule. None of those shades that we drew are hair-type shades, so we're going to go to the first Druid phase of the game. During the Druid phase, it's our turn to make actions that lead us closer to victory. Our objective every game is to lay to rest every shade in the deck, and we can use our actions and our Wandering Druids' actions in order to accomplish that. We know that each shade needs an amount of balance restored to it equal to that top number, and so we're going to start our very first turn with Wisdom's action. Wisdom's primary action is to name a shade name, in this case Restless, which is one of the names of the shades, and to restore 10 balance to every Restless shade in play. Restless have 40 balance total, so they're all down to 30, and in Shaderest we keep track of remaining balance in the positives. So we placed 30 in groups of 10 markers on each of those. Now, Wisdom has an optional secondary action. We can choose one of two effects. As soon as we chose Wisdom to act, they resolve their primary, and then they must resolve their secondary. We can't break it up by switching and going to a different druid. And their secondary options were to give us armor of a type, or to peek ahead in the shade deck and potentially stop one of those shades from rising during the next turn. We chose the armor for now. In Folktale difficulty, we can use up to 7 of a combined spiritual and physical armor types. That'll make sense in a bit, but for now, we're going to stock up on our defenses. We anticipate taking some damage in this solo Wrath game. Our Wandering Druid Fervor is far more focused on offense than Wisdom. Wisdom has this kind of balance between forces, whereas Fervor is aggressive. Her primary action is to deal 10 balance to one shade and then up to 5 balance to 2 nearby shades. Now, nearby means that shade has to be at the same location. It doesn't mean that it's close to her or far away from her. It's the target of wherever she's thrown her word fireball. Here she hit the Wailer for 10, and she splashed over to the Restless on both sides, left and right, for 5. Her secondary action is to throw a giant fireball of 25 balance, and one of those Restless had exactly 25 remaining. And that cleanly took it out. However, we had to resolve our timeline effect. When Restless are laid to rest, we have to roll a die. We passed so far, so that Restless just goes to the discard, and we move on. Now we're finally considering what our character can do, Wrath. Now, Wrath is a complete druid, meaning that they have access to all of their spells and all of their actions rather than a Wandering Druid, which kind of has a pre-programmed turn. We have 3 core actions we can complete optionally every druid phase. We chose to engage, which is to pull one of the shades to us from a different location. We choose to restore balance, which is where you get to throw your dice against a shade. And here we easily match the number of 20 by summing our thrown dice, so we can just lay that Wailer to rest. Our final remaining action circle is called Cast, where we can look at one of our spells and potentially resolve it by paying its cost, whatever it might be, in both time and spirit. As a druid, we have 2 core resources, health and spirit. If you run out of health, you're out of the game. If you run out of spirit, you can't cast your better spells. For now, we're not going to take the cast action because none of our 4 spells really match the situation that we were in. And that's okay. That happens sometimes. We're going to look at our last Wandering Druid, who's also in a similar situation. This is Dusk, and her primary action is to deal 20 balance to a shade engaged with another druid. There are no shades engaged with another druid, so she has to skip her primary action and go straight to her secondary, which she has another suboptimal choice. She's going to choose to engage one of the shades and deal 10 balance to it. Here at the end of this druid phase, we see that all 3 of our Wandering Druids have acted. Our primary druid, Wrath, has used 2 of their 3 actions, and they're going to pass on their 3rd. And there's only 2 shades remaining, one engaged with Dusk and one up here at the cairn. During the shade phase, it's the shade's turn to act. They're going to attempt to deal damage to druids, knock them out of the game, and essentially win by defeating all of us. Now, druids still control the shade phase, but there's a number of limiters we have to keep in mind. We must activate every existing shade, and we can activate them in any order. The shades follow a kind of pattern. They try to engage human druids first, Wandering Druids second, and then they deal their damage. Shades also act according to their animal icon, which is very interesting here. We've drawn a feaster with a hare icon. So in the shade phase, existing shades act and then new shades are drawn. Typically, new shades don't really do anything. They exist at the cairn and they have to wait a whole round before they can act. But hares are going to act as if they had already been drawn. They're going to immediately act. They both engage and attack. Earlier, we saw Restless. They had turtle icons. They only engage or attack. So that Restless earlier moved in front of us, and now the hare has moved and attacked a Wandering Druid. Now, Wandering Druids are functionally immortal. They can't take health losses. They don't have health to lose or gain. But if a Wandering Druid would be engaged with 3 or more shades at any time, they're overcome and they're removed from the game. Back to our current turn, at the start of the Druid phase is some upkeep where you remove time from spells and you flip your action tokens from their used to their active side. Now, fortunately for us in the first turn, we didn't cast any spells, so we don't have to worry about the time rule. But unfortunately, we are faced with more problems than we were on the first turn. We still have the 4 new shades we just drew, and the 2 existing shades we didn't lay to rest at the end of last turn. Looking over our options, we've decided to start with Wrath this turn. Now, we can resolve one action with Wrath and then kick it over to a Wandering Druid. So we engaged that Wailer at the top of the screen, and then we're going to ask Dusk to help us. Now, Wandering Druids are different than full Druids. When you start an activation with them, you have to finish that resolution. So we started with Dusk. Her primary action is to deal 20 balance to a shade engaged with us. We chose the Wailer that we just engaged. That leaves it at 10. Her secondary action, this time we're going to choose Throw Knives, where she deals 10 balance to one shade at a location, and then 10 balance to a shade at a different location. We chose for her to deal 10 to the Restless in front of us, and then a Restless up at the cairn. Now, sometimes it's difficult to tell how to best use your actions in Shaderest. We could have thrown that knife at the same Wailer we had previously damaged, but we have plans and abilities that will allow us to maximize our usage, and we use Dusk to reach a shade that we couldn't easily reach with some of our other abilities. Next, we'll call on Fervor to throw her standard 10 balance fireball that splashes for 5. And as you get used to the patterns of this game, you'll see that we've managed to bring a Restless to 25, which is Fervor's little magic number for her first of her secondary actions. She can deal 25 balance to a shade. And she throws that big fireball up there, and she would lay this Restless to rest. We have to roll the die. We rolled under our check number of 5, so that Restless just quietly goes to the discard like they would normally, and play proceeds. We were able to combine two different powers to, again, reach a target that we wouldn't normally be able to. Part of that is we're playing Wrath, and Wrath is a melee druid. Wrath has a very easy time dealing with shades that are in front of them, engaged with them, at Wrath's own location, but they have a difficult time dealing with shades that are far away. So we're trying to use our Wandering Druids to take care of problems before they reach anyone. Here, Wisdom's following suit with the same idea. Name the number of shades that's the most populous on the board, do their splash damage, and then we're still going to stock up on armor. This might be a good note that there's two different kinds of damage types in the game, and right now Wrath is faced with two different shades, each of which deal a different type of damage. No matter what kind of damage a shade would deal to a druid, it always goes to their health. We've chosen to gain 2 physical armor, which would protect us from, say, the Restless, which does physical damage on its turn. But the Wailer would do spiritual. So even though we have physical armor, the Wailer would cut right through it and go straight to our health. If we lose all of our health, we're out of the game. We can't let that happen. So we choose to use our cast action on the spell called Damn. Damn let us lay to rest any shade on the board that has a certain threshold of balance remaining. In this case, exactly 10. Well, the Wailer had exactly 10, so we used Damn. We paid its cost of 2 time cubes, and then resolved that effect by laying the Wailer to rest. Here we used our Restore Balance action, where we threw dice, to lay to rest the Restless. Unfortunately, we failed the die roll. We rolled 5 or higher, and so that Restless came back to life, and here's a classic problem. We thought we had been so clever, we had used all of our actions to clear all of the threats on the board in front of us, which left us with no actions remaining when the game gave us a twist. When that Restless came back, they came back at full balance, and now it's the Shade phase, where they immediately attacked us. Again, they're a turtle shade, so they either move or attack. They're already in our location, so they attacked us. All the other shades in the game do their performed action in accordance with their animal icon, and then we draw 4 new shades. Now, as you're pretty used to this, the game's going to keep delivering new problems to us, and as long as we're behind on clearing these shades, we're in trouble. Now, there's a few good things coming our way. Next time that Shades rise, we'll draw a Solstice card, which is the opportunity to restore health, spirit, and time from our boards. This doesn't happen very often. We can see on our turn track there exactly twice in this game we're going to get a Solstice, and the first one comes pretty early. Now, we can plan our future turn around that. Here, we jumped the gun a little bit. We tried to start the Druid phase, but we forgot that we drew 2 more Hair shades. And so once again, these Feasters, which are Hair-type shades, are going to move and therefore attack the exact same turn that they're revealed. As they came encounter with Wrath, who they chose to target first, they did 1 physical damage and removed physical armor. They ran over, and we chose Fervor for the second one to engage. Now, Fervor's a Wandering Druid, so doesn't lose any health, but we do need to keep track of how many shades she has in front of her. If any Wandering Druid hits 3, remember they're out of the game. Now that all the shades have acted, we're ready for that Druid phase. We finally talk about time. At the start of the Druid phase, 1 time cube is removed from each spell, unless you have Restless in front of you. The special rule that Restless have is that you remove 1 fewer. So in that case, we could remove no time from our only spell that had time on it, which was Damn, but we chose Kindred as our discipline, and Kindred will help us remove time no matter what's happening on the board. We'll forcibly remove cubes. Another thing that we slightly glossed over, though it didn't have a game impact, is our Season of Life. It's called Wild Heart. It gives us bonus physical power when there's a hair shade in play. Again, it didn't impact last round, but it will impact all future rounds, so we'll do our best to keep track of that. As long as a Feaster, which are the hair-type shades in the first cairn, are in play, we do 8 bonus Restore Balance whenever we roll our dice. We're going to use that right away, roll our dice, add the 8 extra balance in, and clear that 25 from the Feaster, therefore laying it to rest. Wrath as a druid has excellent options for both leading rounds and ending rounds. When rabbits are in play, maybe we want to use our Restore Balance action early. Even if we target those rabbits, we'll still get the bonus for that time. Whereas if we hold on to that action for the end of the round, we might lose all the rabbits and lose that bonus power. Again, the game is going to present very simple problems to us, but we need to use our resources as efficiently as possible to clear those problems, or we're going to be in the situation you see right now, where we have maybe too many shades on the board. So we're reviewing what we can do, specifically with Fervor and her secondary option. She can evade the shades in her area, and that would immediately save her from potentially getting kicked out of the game in the next round. We're getting pretty familiar with her primary action. That would be to throw that initial 10 Restore Balance and then to do the Splash 5. Now, there's a suboptimal situation where she wasn't able to get all of the splash. However, we weren't really interested in that part this round. We're interested in her secondary, which allows her to evade all shades and then deal 5 to all the shades at the cairn at the same time. Now, 5 isn't a large number in Shaderest, but it is kind of a magical number that might hit some breakpoints for us. That Whaler in particular is at 15 now. Our job might not be to outright remove a threat, but to combine numbers in such a way that maximizes their usage. Those Feasters are also at 20 even. Now, we know we've got 2 options here, Dusk and Wisdom. Dusk can do 20 even, but only to shades that are engaged with another druid. Here, Wisdom has a shade engaged with them that has exactly 20 left. Unfortunately, that shade is a Restless who hasn't been laid to rest for the first time yet, so we're choosing the slightly safer option of targeting a Restless in front of Wrath, who has been laid to rest. If we take the one with the golden cube on it off the board first, then we have less to worry about. We also get to maximize Wisdom's turn by dealing that 10 to everyone. We're not going to commit on that just yet. Instead, we're going to conclude Dusk's secondary action by throwing some knives around and trying to ponder here how best to use Wrath. Wrath already threw their Restore Balance, their dice, early in the round, but they still have an Engage, which they'll use to pull a shade, and a Cast. We'll get our first chance to see a more potent spell from Wrath, Shatter. Shatter costs 1 spirit and 7 time. We know a solstice is coming up, which will restore 1 spirit and up to 5 time. So we can spend our resources here pretty safely. Now, Shatter as a spell does 2 things. The first thing it does is stun 1 shade engaged with Wrath. So again, that's 1 shade at Wrath's location. And then it has this kind of ongoing effect, which every time we roll our dice, every time we take the Restore Balance action, we can throw time cubes off of Shatter to enhance the amount of balance we've restored. We're choosing to use this as kind of like an attack steroid, as well as an immediate defensive option. We've stunned that Restless, so we know it can't attack us during its next turn. A stun forces a shade to just skip its next activation. Now, it took a lot of finagling, but we got those 2 Feasters to exactly 10 balance remaining, combining just about everyone's powers on the board. Now, why did we focus those hair-type shades, even though those are giving us bonuses? It's because of their special rule. If a Feaster would deal damage to a Druid's health, they're going to heal all the way up and ignore all the balance they'd previously taken. So we thought it was pretty important to get rid of them. In addition, they're just guaranteed damage on the board, usually to us. So resolving Wisdom's primary, getting rid of those 2 Feasters, we thought that was the best possible use, even though there's an undealt with Restless up there, a Whaler up there. There's actually several Restless engaged with other Druids. That could have been more balance restored, but it allowed us to lay to rest more shades. As we enter this shade phase, every existing shade must activate, and the order we resolve them does matter. But less so for this Whaler. This Whaler says if it starts its turn at the cairn, which it will no matter what we do, it will deal 1 health to all druids. Again, Wandering Druids don't have health, but Wrath does. And this spiritual damage can't be blocked by physical armor, which is the only kind of armor we have. We're going to slightly tip that Whaler card to remind us we've already activated that card, and then we'll move forward to the others. This Restless can engage Fervor, who's missing a shade and therefore the most prioritized druid. The stunned Restless in front of Wrath just becomes unstunned. That was a pretty easy activation. And the other 2 Restless attack Wandering Druids, but again, they don't have health, so they can't lose health. Easy to resolve. We draw 4 shades, and the Solstice card is not a shade, so we have to draw 5 cards from this deck. Solstice card and 4 new shades. One of those new shades is a Feaster. We know that Feasters would immediately act. We finally get to use our Cairn Seal. We have 6 Cairn Seals to use this game, courtesy of having Kindred as a discipline. Cairn Seals let you choose shades that would otherwise rise and delay them for exactly 1 turn. So that Feaster isn't technically on the board. It's not technically in the game. We can't use our Wild Heart Special Wrath rule to gain physical power from it. But it's okay. We're probably not going to need that this round. Additionally, we have a Solstice card in play. Solstices let us heal, and they let us remove cubes. Here we're going to do some time manipulation. Every red time cube is worth 5. We've spilled ours over here, so we need to be careful. But we're just changing them around, and we're trying to remove and add cubes to maximize the 5 cube removal and the known cube removal that happens at the start of every druid phase. This gets a little mathy here, and I don't want to bore you with it, but essentially we're going to choose to remove cubes that let us gain the maximum number of cubes still on our spell. We want Shatter to have cubes on it so that we can spend it when we use our Restore Balance action. Now we have to finish resolving our Solstice before the druid phase can officially begin, but as we're at full spirit and full health thanks to that Solstice and we've removed optional cubes, we're pretty much done. We then pulled our cube off for Kindred, and we're ready for this druid phase. We can throw our Solstice card to the side. It's difficult to tell right now if we're getting ahead or behind of our difficulty curve, so we're checking our Cairn card layout to see when our next Solstice will appear. It's not a secret, you can't really thumb through the deck, but they are double-sided, and the Cairn card tells you how many shades are in a set before you reach it. We know that we're going to need at least 5 more phases before we see that next Solstice card. We'll let Dusk start off our round because she does exactly 20 to a shade engaged with a druid, and that's what we had set up before. That Restless had a gold cube on it, telling us that it had risen before, so we can skip the die rolling for it. And then she's got the throw knife options, and we're just going to try to get all of the Restless on the board to a healthy number for Wisdom. I think that's going to be our focus. With so many Restless in play, Wisdom is going to be a key component to that. Fervor is going to assist by throwing their 10 and doing their splash, and Wrath is also going to look probably to focus anything that it can. There is a Restless on the board with 5 balance, and if you do remember, Wrath has a spell called Damn that allows them to lay to rest any shade that has a threshold of balance or lower. That threshold right now is 10. So if we can target any shade with 10, we can just remove them using a spell regardless of where they are. Using our resources and our powers efficiently is the key to success here. We've seen just enough rounds of the game to know that if we get behind on removing shades, we get in trouble very quickly. And we know a Solstice isn't coming for 5 more rounds. We can't really afford to take any losses either to health or spirit that would endanger our run. We've chosen, in that regard, to use Fervor's secondary that pushes or evades the shades out of her zone, out of her location, and deals 5 to all the shades at the cairn. This is to spread the love a little bit and to help set up Wisdom not just this turn, but the next turn. And Wisdom's got a huge Restless name here, where they're going to take 10 off of every Restless that's on the board. And they've, quote-unquote, laid 2 of them to rest. We have to roll dice to see if that really happened. But they've also set up a few for the future round. The first die here is going to feel pretty bad on a 7. That one's coming back. The second one is coming back as well. We lost that coin flip, if you will, the die roll twice, which means we still have 2 full health Restless in front of our Wandering Druids, despite all of our best efforts. We have maybe wisely in this case, kept Wisdom for the end. Wisdom secondary action, we're still going to choose physical armor. We know we're going to take physical damage. There are so many Restless on the board, and every Restless poses a physical damage threat. We are going to lead with Dam, as I kind of spoiled earlier. We're just looking to make sure anybody has 10 or fewer balance. We can use Dam. We can roll under. Finally, we rolled under 5. That Restless really is a goner. We have Engage and our Restore Balance action left. We could aim high here. We could take one of those 40 health full balance shades, or we can try to finish off one, kind of a gamble. We're going to risk the gamble, I think. We're going to throw these dice, see what happens. And wouldn't you know it, we were due for a bad roll. If we finally rolled under our numbers, which matters to us. Now, we have Shatter, which lets us throw time cubes off of it passively to boost our Restore Balance action. We did lay the Restless to rest, but it came back with a roll over 5. So best intentions, once again, let us down. We've got 3 Restless that came back from the grave, and 2 Restless up at the cairn. That's a lot of shades still on the board, knowing that we are for sure going to see 4 more during the next phase. Now, only Restless engaged with Druids do damage. They are Turtle Shades. They move or attack, so the ones up at the cairn will only move, but the one in front of us will definitely bite, taking our physical armor, which would work so hard as a gift from Wisdom. Something to mention yet again is we can only consume 7 armor of the combined physical and spiritual types. We've already used 3 of them, so no matter how much more armor we receive, we're still capped, if you will, at using 4 more. Here are the 4 more shades. One of them, the first one to be drawn, must be the one that was sealed. It keeps its seal as a reminder that we can't seal it again. We also drew another Feaster, so it feels like a lot of shades are moving at once, even though the 4 that we drew, we knew one of them was going to go. Turns out we drew another Feaster. There's a lot of motion up there. We're going to use one of our Cairn Seals to delay this Whaler. Whalers are really a threat only to Wrath at this time, as that's the only human druid in play, the only one with health to lose. And we just don't have the resources to focus everything down and the Whaler. Again, we have 2 Restless in front of us. They rot our spells. Kindred still steals time off of our board. We kind of skip through that. That's a complex interaction. But Kindred is going to speed our spells up whether we want them to or not. What we really want to do is use those cubes on Shatter as damage amplification cubes. And we're sitting on a 40 health Restless. We have all of our bonuses in play from having a Harriet, and we throw a pretty good set of dice. We add up to 40 with our bonus 8 from power, and we throw in 2 cubes for the bonus 10. That's enough to put the Restless to rest. It has risen before, so we can put it in the discard. We don't have to roll that die again. It was a lot to take it down, but it was a full health shade that we managed to take out basically on our own. So I would say that was a good action. Wrath still has their Engage and their Cast if we need them for other problems. And we're looking at some things. I think we will pull this Restless here with the Engage, and we'll cast another Spirit cost spell called Disrupt. That is a time cost of 5. We'll pull that out of the bag. And 1 Spirit. We've already paid that. Disrupt will stun all the shades engaged with us, and then it will evade them. Evade is the game turn for moving them from your location back to the cairn. When you stun and move a turtle shade, you've effectively stunned it twice, as they can only move or attack. The next shade phase, a stunned shade will skip, and then the shade phase after that, which is a whole nother round away, it's a turtle shade, it will only move. So I'm not going to say we're going to ignore them, but we can safely think of those shades as not a threat currently. And if they're taken out, well, that's just a bonus. Here our Wandering Druids are getting quite overwhelmed, with 2 of them at 2 already. We need to use their actions as efficiently as possible to remove as many cards from the board as we can. We're going to lead with Dusk then, and do her 20 balance to a shade engaged with another Druid. That puts that Feaster at a nice round 5. She can then throw 10 balance knives to 2 different locations, hitting 1 shade at each location. It's a tough call here what we should really focus on, but we're choosing, once again, to gamble a little bit and aim for Restless that haven't been knocked out of the game. Maybe we'll finally roll under 5 and they'll stay dead. Fervor's up next with her classic 10 and 5 splash. Now that whaler is up there, but remember it has a seal on it and it's underneath the row, telling us that the whaler isn't technically in play and therefore not a valid target for the splash. So she'll hit the 10 on the restless, she'll throw the 5 at the one that already has a 5. And then she'll use her secondary action, the evade and deal 5 to all. This puts us at an interesting place for a few of them. It does take that feaster off the board, which is important, and it pushes restless below 10, and you know who goes next. That's Wisdom. That's right. Wisdom can name restless, deal 10 to all of them, and we can get some die rolls on 2 more cards and maybe get lucky. Yeah, we ended up focusing one of the stunned restless that earlier in the round we were hoping not to prioritize, but sometimes your collateral damage will do that. Now we're hoping to get lucky with these knockouts. We need these restless to leave the board, and any other balance on another restless that's just icing for the cake or something to work with next round. We rolled under 5. We did it on the first one, hoping for the second one. And we landed on a 6. It's 1 for 1. We're going to have to accept what we roll here. We don't have a lot of options. But as long as we're getting 50-50 on these resurrections, we're going to come out a little bit ahead. The real danger from this timeline isn't if your luck will run out, it's when. As we wind down the 5th Druid phase, we should probably take an assessment of what we're doing that's working, what we're doing that isn't working. I would say that we haven't sustained health damage very well. We're relying on armor, and we continue to rely on armor here with a secondary action of Wisdom to give us yet more physical armor. We're hoping to make the best use of the 7 that we can, the 7 consumed rule. But at the same time, health is a resource. We know we have a solstice coming. It's okay if certain effects, like whalers, damage our health bar so that we can use our resources to focus on more pressing issues. Speaking of which, it's the shade phase, where shades act, and the order of these shades might matter. First, any stun shade can just be unstunned. We don't have to deal with that. Wrath doesn't have any shade in front of them, meaning that they're the priority druid. If we choose that restless to come over, it will move, and as it's a turtle, it won't attack. And that means that the feaster, who can move and attack, can target the Wandering Druid, and we won't lose any of the armor that we just asked Wisdom to give us. Next, we draw 4 new shades, one of which must be the sealed whaler from last round. That means 3 face-down cards that get revealed as all restless. Of course they are. Why would they be anything else at this point? Oh, we have a bit of a problem. How to spend our cairn seals. Previously glossed over, every cairn card has a special rule at the bottom, and the Cairn of Belshee's special rule is that when the keeper, or the big bad shade that stands as kind of the boss of this mission, rises, we're going to get an additional wave of 4 shades. Now, we want to keep 4 cairn seals, probably for that additional wave of 4. So I'm not going to spend any here, and for better or worse, that means we're going to move on to the Druid phase. We'll do our time upkeep, our action token upkeep, and deal with, as best as we can, what's directly in front of us, which is quite a few restless that have already risen again, which means if we take them out, they'll be gone for good. Which is nice. And we still have that feaster in play. As long as we have that feaster, that hair type in play, we get bonus power, meaning we could potentially hit 40 all on our own, just like we did last time. However, with this many restless in play, and Wisdom just begging to use their primary action, we might as well lead with Wisdom's 10 to every restless. It's a little bit of a hassle for upkeep, but that puts most of them at 30 and some below that. Now, Wisdom has 2 options for their secondary action. Now, we've been taking armor for most of the game, but they do have a second option that allows them to reveal the top 2 cards of the Shade deck and choose one of them to seal, just as if they had spent a cairn seal. So it's kind of like an additional free cairn seal. We'll pull one from the bag out here, not from our personal supply. We've revealed a restless and a whaler, and I think we're going to choose the whaler to seal. That will delay them next round. They're still not in the game. They're still not, in play or anything. That seal will come into effect later. But sometimes knowledge alone is power, and so Wisdom peering ahead into the deck for us has already given us a measure of control that we wouldn't normally have, even if we sacrificed armor for that choice. And we still have the remaining Wandering Druids to walk through. We still have Fervor Fireballs and Dusk Knives to make choices about. And all along the way, every time we knock out a Restless that doesn't have a token on it, we need to roll. Oh, thank goodness. And that one, once again, we rolled under 5, so we actually get to put that one to sleep. in the game of Shaderest, you aren't really antagonistically attacking or being attacked. It's kind of an abstraction of healing, of restoring and settling. And in this case, the Cairn of Belshi, these are our long dead, long forgotten ancestors who have risen. And again, we're not beating them back into the grave physically. We're more like restoring or resolving their fears. We're telling them that the world has changed, but it's not necessarily scary. It's just different. We're comforting them. We're showing them the good things in life. Well, at least most of us are. I can't say that for Wrath. Wrath might just be swinging his little wolf paws. You can never quite tell. Getting back into the action, we've got Dusk, who's very reliable here with her 20 targeted and then her 10 throwing knives. She does have another option for her secondary action to engage and deal 10. Well, it's hard to use that with our exact setup that we have, with Wrath being a physical, a melee druid. It's difficult for Dusk to use that action effectively, but normally you could use it to pull, say, a shade off of a druid rather than from the cairn. We still have our hair type in play, so when we get to Wrath and their Restore Balance action, we get all of our bonuses. It takes us to 24 on dice and power, leaving this particular shade with 6. Now, luckily, we have cubes on Shatter. Each cube we spend is 5 additional balance. We'll have to spend 2 cubes, but that's kind of what we wanted to do anyway. We lay this Restless to rest for good. It already had a token. We don't have to roll, leaving us with our Engage and Cast. Of all of our spells that we might want to cast, Shatter is probably still at the top of the list. We like to have the cube bonuses on hand for the exact situation we just saw, which is underrolling on a target that we should have been able to hit. Additionally, casting Shatter doesn't deal any damage, so we can pull the Feaster with our Engage, we can cast Shatter and stun it, and kind of keep it in our pocket like a little pet hare. It's going to give us our Wild Heart bonuses as long as they're around, and we're not necessarily going to focus on them right away, at least not this round, not this Druid phase. Once again, we reach the end of the phase as everyone's tokens are dark. There's no additional actions or special actions to be taken. None of those cards exist currently. We kind of need to zoom out to review how we're doing. We know that no matter what happens, the shade in front of us in the shade phase will become unstunned, and that's not going to change anything. We also know that the other shades in play will need to focus the Wandering Druids to equalize the number at 1 shade to everyone before prioritizing Wrath once again. There's 2 shades in front of Wrath at this point. We're all set to go. And I do make a continuity error here. I forgot that Sealed Whaler doesn't have to enter play. It is kind of an out-of-timing rule there. I will pull it into play. I don't think it's going to hamper our playthrough. But when Wisdom uses their secondary action to seal a shade, they seal it in the future, meaning that the seal doesn't get consumed. Anyway, we've got 4 new shades that entered play. Only one of them was a hare. Only one of them will act immediately, and the rest will threaten us from the cairn. As we go to our Druid phase, we have to make our very classic decision of time management, removing 1 from each spell, but counting 1 off for the Restless. And Kindred eats 5 cubes, so when they hit that 5 cube special eat limit, they must eat them all to heal all druids. We knew we were going to whiff on that, or at least we suspected we would. And sure enough, that heal can't help anyone because everyone else is a Wandering Druid, and Wrath was already at full health. So we're just going to have to take our loss there, add another resource that we didn't maximize. Learning to use your health pool as another tool is kind of one of the more challenging elements of Shaderest. That being said, we have Dusk's classic 20 balance opener, and then 10 balance knives. Between Dusk and Fervor, the 2 of them are such nice companions to use as Wandering Druids because their action resolutions are very straightforward. So Fervor will go second here and do the classic 10 to 1, 5 to either side. And we're going to shorthand our token usage here because we know we want to use her secondary action that deals 25 evenly. So we can just put a 25 out there on one of them temporarily, because right away, she's just going to nuke it. As it's a Whaler and not a Restless, we don't have to roll for it. We can just put it in the discard. Very handy druids, the way that they interact. That leaves us with Wisdom, and as previously pointed out, there are a lot of Restless. In fact, 3 right in front of them, 4 that's in front of Wrath, 5 that's at the cairn, all dealing 10 to each of them. It's a lot of die rolls. Now, the one on the left we don't have to roll for. We could just discard it. It already had a token. The one in front of Wisdom, the one in front of Fervor, and the one in front of Wrath, however, are a separate discussion. Looks like we failed that one roll here. Come on, dice. There we go. A value of 1. We can safely remove that one. Oh, big money as we approach the one on Wrath. We need this one to go away. Okay, good. We just don't want to lose our armor yet. Again, Restless aren't particularly threatening, but once they start stacking up in front of a Druid, you get into a lockhold pattern where you can't get your spells back because they stop time removal in accordance with how many Restless are in front of you. And they start dealing physical damage on a reliable level. Okay, we do have our pet hare in front of us. We'll still choose armor from the end of Wisdom's resolution. Maybe that's a mistake. Maybe we should go for the seal. But at this point, we just want to have our max armor tokens in front of us for when the bad things start happening. Believe it or not, that's not yet. We'll use our engage on this whaler. We're considering it. We keep kicking it around. We're not sure. We need to make sure we throw the actual balance numbers off of the shades so that we can look at their actual health. Sometimes it gets a little easy to forget when you're doing multiple things at once. We'll throw our restore balance at our little pet hare here. It is damage and it needs to be removed, and we don't have access to a free stun. That solstice is coming to give us some of our spirit back, but we are sitting at 2 out of 4, meaning that if we use too much of our spirit too fast, we won't have our stuns for later in the round when we need them. We'll kick over to the shade phase. We're not going to use our cast. We're not going to use our engage. We wouldn't benefit from those actions anyway. Yes, we could engage the whaler, but at the end of the day, the same kind of result would happen. We're still going to lose 1 health from it. We choose, of all things, for the Restless has to engage us anyway. It can't choose Dusk. We're the priority. And the whaler will scream and deal 1 damage to our health. We need to draw 4 new shades, which at this point you should be pretty familiar with. It's always going to be 4. The real question is, what are those for? We get double Feaster, double Whaler. The price of drawing so many Restless earlier, we start seeing the others lumped together. The Feasters must immediately act, and they will choose first to balance out the shades by engaging Dusk, and then they have to pick Wrath as they're the priority Druid. We'll lose an armor from that Feaster who moves and attacks, and those Whalers are sitting up there really threatening us in the long run. They can combine their screams and do a lot of damage to us. We know we're getting closer and closer to that solstice, but we're kind of losing track of where it is. We choose to rot using the Restless rule Shatter. That means we only lose a cube off Disrupt. Kindred then always eats 1 time cube. And we move over to moving our action tokens to their bright side for the standard Druid phase start. Reviewing what we have is a lot of Feasters in play. 1 for Dusk, 1 for Fervor, 1 for Wrath. But the real threat are the Whalers at the cairn. Now, Wrath is a little bit at the mercy of the Wandering Druids here, because while they do excel at dealing with problems in front of them, they struggle with problems that stack up at the cairn. They only have the 1 engage action if they want to pull one of those bird-type animal icons. We haven't really covered this, but birds retreat during their turn, and that's why those Whalers have either been taken out before they could act, or when they act, they don't bother engaging a Druid. They try to remove themselves. So these melee Druids have to find a way, in this case, their engage action usually, to pull shades to them and set up a combo just like this. Fervor doesn't have to throw her first primary attack at the cairn, it's just there's usually more shades there than anywhere else. She can throw her primary attack anywhere, and she will choose, in this case, a shade in front of Wrath. And the 5 splashes can attack. The cards don't have to be arranged left and right, but just to the adjacent, the nearby shades that are there. Now, something we haven't talked about is the bottom line of every Wandering Druid. Every Wandering Druid has that primary action, the top line, the secondary action, which is a choice, and then a bottom line called a spell action. And once per game, during the Druid phase, the Wandering Druid can resolve their spell, even if it's not like their exact turn, even if it's not their resolution. Now, these spell actions are powerful effects, and Fervor's in particular was one that we failed to keep in mind as we were playing, and she would give us a lot of physical armor and spiritual power. We've seen physical armor in this game so far. It's been protecting us from physical damage, but spiritual power is going to boost the effects and the numbers that our spells generate. Now, she gives us that allotment, and she doubles the amount she hands out when the Keeper is active. So we're keeping her spell for when the Keeper arises. We're pretty much keeping everybody's spell for when the Keeper shows up, because we're pretty sure, due to the special rule in the cairn, and we're pretty sure because the Keeper's a dangerous shade, that that's going to be the most difficult time for us. As Wisdom resolves their turn, we're going to use their second of the secondary actions, the Reveal to Seal 1. And hopefully we can remember that that's a seal in the future. We don't have to consume that seal right away. Either way, we see a Restless and a Wailer, just like last time. We choose the Wailer for the future seal this time. We also got to see, because they're double-sided, that the Solstice is coming. And according to that cairn card layout, the Solstice and the Keeper are right next to each other. So next round is going to be a wild one. We're going to use, as best as possible, our spell to take out this shade. Now, this particular Restless Shade had under 10 health, so it was a candidate for Dam. But you can see what's happened here. We've used our Engage already, which is our only way to move cards around, and we left our Restore Balance, perhaps one of our strongest actions, unable to resolve. Now, that's kind of a huge blunder. We have no choice but to move on. There's nothing anyone can do to move or alter the game state. So we enter the Shade phase. Wrath is the priority druid, so everyone up here would choose to engage them if possible. That Wailer's going to scream rather than engage. However, one of these shades must engage us. We choose the Restless, because the Restless moves or attacks. That means we don't take damage. Those other feasters can resolve pretty cleanly. They just attack Wandering Druids. And for the second time this game, we failed to consider the future seal rule from Wisdom. Now, is that going to be absolutely devastating or not? I guess we're going to find out. First, we need to pull 4 shades. Now, this can get a little strange. You need to pull exactly 4 new shades. The Keeper and the Solstice card don't count as shades for this. And additionally, we have the Cairn of Belshi special rule. When the Keeper arises, we've got 4 additional shades. So we're looking at 8 shades and a Keeper and a Solstice card entering play. Plus, there was already an existing Wailer. Again, that very first Wailer with the seal on them shouldn't be in play right now. That was a mistake we made. Let's see if we can fix that. The Tyrant is in play, and they are the Keeper. They're a little different than most shades. They behave and have an animal icon and a special rule, but the balance at the top left is multiplied by the number of human druids in play, or the number 2, whichever is greater. And so it says the Tyrant has 100 balance, when in reality it has 200. We'll use this token initially to remind us. But because we're playing in TTS, I'm gonna move things around here pretty shortly. Additionally, I have a special rule that says when they would deal damage to Druid's health, they place 1 time on all of their spells. What's not really easy to see right away is the bear icon that tells you that this shade will attack twice if possible if they start their activation in front of a druid, which means that they could use their special rule multiple times per turn. Earlier, I warned us that I wanted to save our Cairn Seals for this moment, and lo and behold, here is this moment. We get to apply the Cairn Seals as best as possible. We're going to choose all of the Restless. Again, even though those Wailers are more dangerous to us, the Restless are going to gum up our board and slow us down, as well as present a long-term problem, whereas the Wailers would, I think, just be a problem the next turn as well. So we're choosing the Restless there to seal. They will leave play, and again, that one Wailer should join them in leaving play, but that is a mistake. So it will stay in play. We'll resolve our Solstice now, so we get to heal 2, which is good. We started to take a little too much health loss right before this Keeper. And we get 1 of our Spirit back, meaning we could potentially cast our spells multiple times. Here we're in the same boat of removing cubes to maximize how to use Shatter. It is a little confusing, but we think we're going to spend cubes off of Shatter next turn, so we're not going to take the full benefit of this Solstice. Once the Solstice is finished resolving, we can enter the Druid phase. Now, if you thought we were a little behind before, now intense pressure has been applied. Whereas we were struggling to keep up with the number of shades that were constantly rising, I would say that we were in a holding pattern with them. We weren't losing, that's for sure. But with the Keeper and the additional giant wave of shades that's guaranteed, we're going to have to use every resource at our disposal, including our Wandering Druid spell actions. We'll use little spirit tokens to keep track of when we have spent those. Again, those can happen kind of out of sequence with their normal activations. But we have a 200 health Tyrant to be concerned with. We only have 2 physical armor that protects our health pool, and we saw how quickly those whalers can chew through our health. We're going to lead with Fervor. Fervor's going to cap us with armor. You can technically hold more armor than you can use, but for the sake of not complicating our board state, we won't put maximum armor on the board. We will pull out our spiritual power. What does spiritual power do? We've seen how physical power, courtesy of our Wildheart special rule from Wrath, gave us additional values whenever we roll our dice. Well, our spiritual power is kind of the reverse. They affect our spell numbers. When we look at our spell board, Shatter and Damn in particular, we can see numbers in purple, like Lay a Shade to Rest with 10 plus 2, and the plus 2's in purple, balance remaining from the Damn spell. Well, every time you have spiritual power, you get to add those purple numbers equal to the number of purple plus X's you have. We have 2 of them now, meaning that Damn can now lay 14 balance shades to rest rather than 10 balance shades to rest. And every cube from Shatter is worth 7 additional balance instead of 5. It's printed on the board that it's 5 plus 1, and again we have 2, so it's plus 1 twice. We gained those bonuses courtesy of Fervor's spell action, and we could have spent that a long time ago for half the bonus that we'd have now, but again, for the sake of maximization, we chose to save it for the Keeper, as well as having as big a turn as possible. I hope that pays out well for us. We've switched to a calculator because we're in TTS, and it's going to be easier to show you the Keeper's health at any given moment, as Fervor does 5 balance splash to it and focuses her spells as best as possible on shades that she can take out. She's already finished for the most part. She's done her spell action, her primary, and her secondaries. We're just considering what her options are. And we're presented with 2 obvious challenges. We have a wave of shades that we need to deal with that are threatening Wrath's health bar. And at the end of the day, it's Wrath's health bar, as they're the only human druid, that really matters. But we also have a very durable Keeper shade that we need to at least have considerations for. If we can't outright remove it because its health is too large, its restore balance number too great, perhaps we can stun it and therefore keep it locked down. Wisdom is going to do their very best applying their damage and scrying into the future. As we've already reached our armor limit, we basically are stuck with that Wisdom action for the rest of the game. We kick it over to Wrath, who's using their Engage to bring the Tyrant, the Keeper, into their active location, which helps Dusk, as we know Dusk really needs to have shades in front of other druids in order to use their 20 most efficiently. And after a great deal of deliberation, we've decided that we're going to focus down the Keeper. The Keeper represents the single greatest and most obvious threat to Wrath. Now, we previously talked about how Wandering Druids can only be overcome if they would have 3 or more shades engaged with them. Technically, they have a second loss condition if a Keeper would ever target them with an attack. That Wandering Druid is overcome. Hence why we've chosen to put the Keeper in front of Wrath rather than, say, another Druid engaging them. You can't just babysit the Keeper with a functionally immortal Wandering Druid. That Druid will immediately get removed. And we need our Wandering Druids for as many turns as we can possibly get them. So we're hoping to stave off their loss conditions and put Wrath in a little bit of a pickle here. They've got their restore balance. They're actually looking pretty strong with their physical power and all their cubes on Shatter. But we don't roll the best roll of our life here. We'll throw all 3 cubes. Remember, because of our spiritual power, our cubes from Shatter are now worth 7 additional bonus restore balance. So we throw our numbers here one at a time in the calculator. We're feeling a little lazy. For a grand reveal that we've brought the Keeper down to a magical 123. Now, that number can feel insurmountable, but remember, they just entered play. They haven't taken a turn yet. They just rose from the cairn, and they're already from 200 to 123. So this isn't a lost cause. It's just a very dangerous one. We're going to cast Shatter again because we're out of Shatter cubes. Keepers, just like previously mentioned, they have a special rule for how much health they have. They have a special rule for how they receive stuns. Each stun they would receive is translated into a resilience stack, and it takes as many resilience stacks as there are human players for them to be stunned, or 2, whichever number is greater. In our full solo game, of course, that number will be 2, so we'll need to stun the Keeper twice in order to actually stun them. Well, not impossible, but definitely a tall ask. We enter the shade phase here. All of our actions are over. It's the shade turn. Existing shades act. We get to choose the order of those shades. Then the keeper acts. He always acts at the end of the list of all active shades. And finally, new shades rise. Okay, those two whalers up there at the top, there's nothing we can do about them. No matter what order we activate shades in, they're just going to scream. As they're birds, they're not going to engage anyone. And that leaves all the other shades in a pretty easy to activate pattern. The Restless comes down, the two Feasters attack, and finally, the other Restless swings for 1. The Keeper is not stunned, despite their resilient stack. That is not a stun on them. And it is a bear shade. It started in front of Wrath, so they attack twice. Potentially devastating, but we've dodged any fatal blows, as well as dodging the Keeper's special rule, the Decree of Death. It didn't inflict any health damage, so we can ignore the whole add time to all spells rule. So far, we're okay. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of shades that are entering play. Normally, you only ever draw 4 shades, but you have to draw all the shades that are sealed. In this very rare instance, we had 5. It was going to be 6 shades that were sealed. We just forgot about the 6th one again. And so all 5 shades will enter play. Now, we don't have to draw any additional shades, which is nice, but we can't do anything to stop them. We're out of Cairn Seals. We're out of options. We hit our Druid phase. Kindred is going to eat one of our time cubes, for better or for worse, Kindred. And then our action tokens become bright. And we're faced with the same problem we were last time, but bigger than ever. We're going to lead with Wrath's Restore Balance. Once again, not the most exciting die roll of 16, but we still have our power bonuses and 21 from the combined cubes from Shatter. Each cube is worth 7. We can bring the Keeper's health to a total that is less than 90. And here's something that hasn't been overtly stated yet. We can aim for 0 on the Keeper, just the same way we would any shade, to restore them and lay them to rest. Or we can just aim for a number under 90 and ask Dusk to solve our problem for us. Dusk has a spell action, just like all Wandering Druids, that allows them to deal 90 balance to a shade and remove them from play. We're going to just take her standard action right now of the 20 and the throw knives for 10. She can take out so many shades right now, taking these whalers out. And once again, remaining just a very efficient Wandering Druid that's simple to use. And then we're left with how to use her spell action. I think there's no way around it. There's no hope for it. We could throw 10 at the Keeper and then keep them around in the game for another turn of Wrath. Or we could just remove them and then choose that knife to go to a different target, which is what we're going to do. We're going to use her spell action. You can use it out of sequence, so even though she's technically resolving another action, she can interrupt herself with her own spell action and just remove that Keeper. The greatest threat to us has been removed. But the question is, did we use our resources as efficiently as possible? We have tried to lay to rest one of the Restless at the top of the screen, but unfortunately we failed the die roll. And it's about time, too. We were due for another resurrection. And how's the second one looking? Unfortunately, we failed that one as well. Maybe a little unlucky, because we need cards to be removed from the board right now. We can't afford to stack up. We already have one on each of the Wandering Druids, which is 1/3 of their individual loss conditions. That's kind of a little too much. Wisdom is doing a wonderful job spreading out just about as much as they possibly can for their Restore Balance with this many Restless in play. It's tempting to aim for those Feasters because Feasters have lower Restore Balance thresholds, but with this many Restless, and again, using Wisdom's ability to future seal, leaves us only with Fervor. And Fervor's going to do the best they can, but there's just a few too many shades at the top of the screen. What we're hoping for right now is a miracle, or at the very least, some kind of divine intervention that's going to radically alter our situation. We know Fervor's magic number is 25, so while she's doing the splash, we're going to move our tokens out so it's easier to see. She's just looking to hit 25, and of course she did, and threw her big fireball right at that low health Restless. But we failed yet another die roll, 3 in a row, with the timeline promising us that our luck would run out and we would get too many Restless. Sure enough, that's exactly what's happened. And Wrath is stuck in a quandary. They have their cast action and their unmentioned so far Howl, their most powerful spell. Perhaps out of greed or just a misassessment of the severity of the situation, Wrath is going to pass on that action and they're not going to use it. This is going to potentially be a very costly mistake. We go to the shade phase, we get to choose what order these shades resolve in. There's no keeper to worry about. Shades engaged with a druid pretty much only have the option of attacking, so we'll lose health. Wrath will lose health to that one already engaged with them. And now all of these Restless will start spreading out. Here they're going to even out the board, so there's 2 in front of everyone. Then Wrath will become the prioritized druid, and that extra little shade down there will engage. And this is, again, not game-changing. We forgot to future seal every one of Wisdom's future sealings, so that very first Restless should not be entering play right now. But it isn't the reason that we're in dire situation, because we left ourselves no real Cairn Seals to work with, and we drew a Feaster. This particular game state, this Feaster, which is a hare, which must activate, has to choose a Wandering Druid because they have fewer shades in front of them than our human druid. As soon as the 3rd shade engages Dusk, she is overcome and removed from the game, and those shades, all the shades that were engaged with her, are moved to the cairn. So we're down in activation. We're down Dusk for the remainder of this cairn. And we have many more shades at the top of the screen, and our existing Wandering Druids already have 2 each. I think we are in real trouble. We go to the Druid phase. We know how this works. We flip our tokens over. We manage our time. And this is the big moment, the make or break turn for Wrath. Can they turn this situation based solely on the power of their unused Howl spell? Well, first of all, what does it do? Since we've talked about it, but we haven't explained what it does. Howl will heal Wrath to their maximum health, whatever number that might be, and it will refresh all of their action tokens, including the action used to cast it. So it's basically a double turn and reset move. The cost, of course, is time. It doesn't cost any spirit, it just costs so much time that we're not going to be able to use that spell more than once at this point in the game. We'll open with Wisdom because there are so many Restless on the board. There's no reason not to deal 10 balance to all of them. Well, it doesn't immediately solve our problem. It is balance and it is being spread out, so that's a benefit. However, I think we're already feeling the keen loss of Dusk, not just because she served as a location for additional shades that, again, being functionally immortal means that she's not losing health, but her activation resolutions of just applying regular balance was needed to keep this board state in check. And she's not here anymore, meaning we can't rely on that 40 balance every round, 20 from her base, and then 10 each from her secondary, resolving twice. Fervor's in a similar situation of being able to apply balance to the board, but maybe not being able to apply enough to counter the loss. Now, they do have a push and melt trick, and there are many, many targets for it, so I think we will focus on that. We've got that initial 10 to throw, and the 5 splashed 2 nearby shades. All things being equal, we're probably going to choose the lowest possible health Restless, and go from there. Fearing an absolute crisis with our back against a wall, we choose card removal over area of effect damage. For starters, the area of effect damage is not going to do anything to those feasters. The restore balance, they're just going to heal themselves up the next time they deal damage anyway. So we go for the big fireball on that Restless. We roll the die, and just out of spite, we fail it again, meaning that we have another full health Restless that isn't going anywhere, and another character that's just not able to compete. I think we might have glossed over this last round, but Wisdom's spell action is to remove 2 wounded shades from the board. They did that in Druid Phase 10. It would just happen so fast, I think we were talking about something else. So I know that we're out of resources on the Wandering Druid side. They've cast their spells, and they've done their normal activations. That just leaves Wrath. Well, there is a hare in play. We're not going to deal with both of those feasters, so we're going to get at least maximum power from our restore balance actions, and we're going to target cards we know we can remove. So our first restore balance resolved took a Restless off the board. Our engage is going to pull another Restless that we know we could remove. Our very first cast will be the legendary Howl. We're going to put 15 time. Each of those reds is 5. We're going to get all of our actions back, and we can just start all over again. We have a restore balance and engage and another cast. Reviewing our options, sadly, I think we already know what's going to happen. we're going to target as many things as we possibly can. Even with a poor roll, we still have some pretty phenomenal damage. It lets us apply quite more balance than we would normally restore, but unfortunately, not enough to lay that shade to rest, and we're stuck once again with a cast action that we aren't sure how to maximize. We do have Dam available, but we also have Disrupt available. Disrupt is going to push and stun many shades, which might technically buy us more time. Our loss condition goalposts are rapidly shifting on us. Yes, technically we only lose the game when Wrath runs out of health, but it would appear as though if we lose all of our Wandering Druids, we're just not going to have the action resolution to handle the shades, and we'll just be overwhelmed by sheer number. Wrath is a human druid, and so they can be engaged with as many shades as the game could possibly throw at them. They are not automatically overcome when they encounter 3 or more. However, as you've seen, there are just too many cards and too much damage, especially in terms of we've already consumed our 7 armor limit. This means that though we had lots of options, we chose Dam as our spell cast to remove a card from the board, and then we still had our engage to at least maybe pull a shade off of a druid. Maybe. We're looking around, we're looking at our different options. It's dawning on us now just how defeated our board state is. No matter what action we take, there are too many shades, and they're going to overwhelm our druids. So we hit our shade phase. We decide not to use our engage because we're just going to lose more health if we do, and we're going to let our druids be overcome. So again, you get to know at least a limited amount of future knowledge. You can make some game decisions based off what you know is going to happen. We chose not to use our engage so that we would have as much health as possible as this shade phase resolves. We also choose to resolve the shades in front of Wandering Druids before moving a third shade into them. This is a very cheesy and endgame tactic of using up as many shade activations as possible and not having, say, our Wrath character to suffer as many activations of those remaining shades. I hope that made sense, but you're looking for wasting shade activations where possible and getting as much advantage out of a very simple game system as you can. Now, for the first time in our playthrough today, we remembered that Wisdom's seal is in the future, meaning that this feaster right here, who has a seal token on them, well, they're not actually present. They're not in the game state. Now, we should put them physically lower than the others to remind us, but at this point, I'm afraid we're just playing out an inevitability, so we're going to kick it forward a little faster than we normally would. This feaster, however, has not yet activated. Of all the feasters up there, we'll run forward and deal exactly 1 health to us. This leaves us in a pretty bleak situation on Druid Phase 12. Normally, we would be about 2 turns away from victory. Instead, we're about 1 turn away from abject defeat. But Kindred will go off. It will force heal us. We will gain 1 health back, which is at least something. And this is a small numbers game. That 1 health could have been the difference earlier. At this point, we can see ahead. We know that there is nothing we can do to stop from losing the 3 health. That is our ultimate loss condition. We can lose all the Wandering Druids. That's fine. That's not how we lose the game. We directly lose by running out of health and having no more human druids left. So we're going to take every action we can, a restore balance to remove shades and engage, a cast on disrupt to stun and remove as many shades from our area as possible, and therefore take as little damage as possible. But you know what I know, which is that there are 3 feasters already up there. Without any other Wandering Druids and any other actions to resolve, we go straight to the Shade phase where existing shades act. All those stun shades become unstunned. We're not going to move their tokens for now, though, because these 3 feasters are all it takes. They move and attack. We go down to 0 health. The game is officially over as a loss. Thank you for joining me on our solo Wrath playthrough. Even though we didn't succeed in clearing our first cairn, it doesn't mean our adventure is over. In Shaderest, when your circle fails to clear a cairn, it's called breaking. The circle will disband, each player will make different out-of-game decisions, and perhaps will return as a different druid. Maybe we enjoyed the way that Dusk played and we'll assume a different mantle. Perhaps we'll come back as Wrath again for another try, choosing a different discipline or a different season of life to start in. Failure is not the end of your story, and as your circle breaks, it's just an opportunity for a new circle to be formed. You'll need to clear the 5 cairns of Shaderest in order to win the total game. Now, you've seen Cairn 1, you've seen some of the ugly tricks and surprises it has in store. Maybe next time we'll succeed in restoring balance to these poor lost shades and lay them to rest so they can enjoy the peace they deserve.